Hello everyone and welcome to my podcast. In this podcast we are going to talk about cultural representation in Disney movies. I want to focus on 5 famous Disney movies: Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, Pocahontas, Moana and Aladdin. The reason I have chosen these movies is because of the cultural diversity. I believe that every movie I have chosen has a lot to offer in terms of culture, even if it's a European one. I want to base my project on this definition of culture by Stuart Hall. Culture is said to embody the best that has been thought and said in a society. It is the sum of the great ideas as represented in the classic works of literature, painting, music, and philosophy, the high culture of an age. Culture is an important part of society, as it is a big part of its history. This is why I started wondering, how was the culture embodied within Disney? To what extent can we say that the culture represented in Disney is the best that has been thought and said about it in a society? There are many Disney productions that revolve around ethnic cultures and difficult subjects, such as, for example, Pocahontas or Aladdin. To what extent can we truly examine if Disney portrays these cultures in a respectful way? I started thinking about this, and therefore an idea for this podcast series was born. Throughout the episodes, you will hear many different terms that helped me analyze Disney movies, from cultural appropriation to Orientalism. Encoding and decoding, which is one of the Stuart Hall theories, is one of the important factors when it comes to representation. The way in which certain characters are built influences the way in which we think about them. For example, Princess Jasmine from Aladdin was presented in a certain way to be seen in a certain way by the audience. The way in which the culture is portrayed on the screen affects the way in which we think about this culture. It is all connected. As Stuart Hall wrote, "Before this message can have an effect, or satisfy a need, or be put to a use, it must first be perceived as a meaningful discourse and meaningfully decoded. It is this set of decoded meanings which have an effect, influence, entertain, instruct, or persuade, with very complex perceptual, cognitive, emotional, ideological, or behavioral consequences." This concept of encoding and decoding will help me analyze why Disney chose to portray these cultures in a specific way from not only the perspective of a researcher, but also from the perspective of the American-based company. After all, Disney tends to hire directors from the United States that do not have any relation to the cultures they write about. I want to examine whether the cultural representation in these movies is actually good and authentic. This is why, for this podcast series, I chose to examine 5 different Disney movies to find out whether the cultural representation in Disney has changed over time. Is Disney's portrayal of cultures respectful, or is it filled with stereotypes and misrepresentations? Find out with me. This podcast and music were written and directed by Martyna Krupińska, 2022.